When people have conversations about firearms, a lot of times the conversation only shifts to whether or not we should own guns. And I believe, as my guest will today talk more about, that this conversation is so much bigger than should we take guns away from Americans. It comes down to a lot of the systemic issues that people are struggling with and how we work through those things. And my guest today has a very unique organization that I had never heard of until I went to the military MCON military conference, and he had a booth there, and I was blown away that there was an organization that existed for people who believe in owning firearms, but also believe in common sense legislation around mental health and the use of firearms. So to talk about these issues today, I have Michael Sodini. Michael, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much for agreeing to come on the Stories of Service podcast, Ordinary People Who Do Extraordinary Work. I'm the host of Stories of Service. And to get this episode started, as we always do, an introduction from my father, Charlie Pickard.
From the moment we're born and lock eyes with our parents, we are inspiring others. By showing up as a vessel of service, we not only help others, we help ourselves. Welcome to S.O.S, Stories of Service, hosted by Teresa Carpenter. Hear from ordinary people from all walks of life who have transformed their communities by performing extraordinary work.
And for years, this conversation around firearms and mental health has been loud, polarized, and painfully unproductive. And what we find is people just talk past each other. The gun rights people are in one corner, and then we have the people that want to take away all the guns in another, and very few will listen to each side. So Michael Sodini, he decided to do something radically different. As the founder and CEO of Walk the Talk America, Michael has spent the last several years building bridges where others have only built walls. His work brings the firearms community and mental health professionals into the same room, and not to argue ideology, but to reduce harm and save lives through education, compassion, and cultural understanding. Before Walk the Talk America, Michael spent 27 years inside the firearms industry as the president of Eagle Imports and a co founder of Avidity Arms. That experience matters because he understands gun culture from the inside and not as a talking point, but as a lived reality. And it's precisely that credibility that allows him to have conversations that most people cannot. His work has taken him everywhere from gun shops to research conferences, from industry events to the Aspen Ideas Festival, and even to the White House. Along the way, Walk the Talk America has developed free and anonymous mental health screenings, clinician training programs that help providers better understand firearms culture, and outreach efforts designed to reduce stigma around asking for help. And today we're going to talk about why the current national conversation keeps failing, what both sides consistently get wrong, and why progress starts with listening instead of lecturing. Michael will talk today about how that trust is built, why culture matters as much as policy, and how real solutions emerge when people stop assuming bad intent. Welcome again, Michael.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you for that intro.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm honored to have you on. And this is such an important conversation and such a unique conversation that very few people, I believe, are willing to have. And that's why when I saw your organization, I was blown away that it even existed. And it's always wonderful to hear about people like yourself who are taking a different approach to a very hard issue. So, first off, as I always ask all my guests, I don't believe you come from a military background. So, I'll just ask, where were you born and raised, and what got you into the firearms industry?
I was actually born and raised in New Jersey, but I lived all over the world. What got me into the firearms industry was nepotism. I'm a third generation firearms industry professional. I had no military service background, and Walk the Talk America really speaks to people who have served or active duty military, and that's what kind of makes it unique. What I'm most happy about, or that I love, the fact that we do it through the gun, right? We don't treat our veterans like they're this wounded duck that you know can't fend for themselves and they're hopeless. And we basically talk about, if you need help, you do it to the gun. And that's why I met you at MCON. MCON, the American Legion, Waco, like they basically saw that there's a need for an organization like mine, and they donated a booth. And it speaks to everybody that's a gun owner. Like that's the beauty of it. You don't have to be a, you know, this person, a first responder. You could just be like, oh, I like what they do. So that's how I got into it.
Well, as a mental health advocate and as a person who believes strongly in protecting the Second Amendment, your mission really spoke to me. And as I was talking to you that day at the booth and learning about some of your programs, I was just amazed that this organization existed, because this, like so many issues, it's not an either or kind of issue. Either we take guns away or we let everyone who wants a gun have a gun, no matter how sick they are, no matter what problems they're suffering from. There has to be common sense policies around gun ownership. And so, tell me a little bit about when you saw that an organization like Walk the Talk America needed to be formed. Like, what were you seeing within the gun industry that were gaps in resources or services that propelled you to do this?
Well, first, it's what I didn't see in the gun industry. Being that I didn't grow up around guns, I grew up in two of the worst places to grow up around guns. I grew up in San Francisco, and obviously, the Jersey Shore. So it just, you weren't exposed to hunting and things like that. So I literally got in, like I said, mentioned earlier, through nepotism. It was almost assumed that I was going to go work for my family when I graduated college, and that's exactly what I did. And one of the things that I noticed about the firearms industry, with not having knowledge of how important the Second Amendment is, and also gun knowledge, I was kind of like a sponge. So I'd watch the arguments on both sides, of the anti-gun side and the pro-gun side, and even the gun neutral side. But what I wasn't seeing was the gun industry leaning into any of the negative outcomes of firearms. So take, for example, every year there's SHOT Show, which will be happening next week in Vegas. Every year there's the NRA show. Every year that I would attend those shows, I had a booth. And it just seemed like one person that used to hang out at the booth would always disappear. And we'd always say, oh, I wonder where Steve is. Like, he's usually always at the NRA show, and he always stops by and hangs out at the booth. And then you'd find out that Steve took his own life with the firearm. We noticed that there was a lot of first responders, a lot of active duty military, and a lot of combat vets that gravitate towards the firearms industry. And suicide affects those communities at a disproportionate amount. So we thought it was a little odd, me and a couple of my coworkers, that it's like, hey, this affects this community so much, but it's like we don't talk about it. And why didn't we talk about it? Because negative outcomes of firearms were always used against us. So
Right.
that's kind of how I saw the need, that this had to exist, because it affects us.
Right. I love it. So basically, you were the one who was saying, "Wait a minute. There is an issue here. It's not the firearm, but it's that a community within the firearms industry is disproportionately impacted by mental health issues due to I mean, and there's a lot of reasons for this. I've thought about it even in the veteran community. Like, why do we talk about veteran suicide and veteran and mental health, or within the first responder community? And I can't speak as not being a first responder, but I can say, as a lot of the people who join the military, sometimes you are joining the military because you're trying to get away from something. So you're trying to escape a bad situation, and so sometimes you don't necessarily have the greatest start in life to begin with, and then you get into the military, and either a combat situation happens, or you suffer in a toxic work environment, or something happens within your service that exasperates that trauma. So I believe that you were dealing with a very unique population that, number one, believed in the Second Amendment, wanted the right to bear arms. But then, number two, just because of the dangerous nature of their job, and that's obviously goes for first responders as well, they will be impacted by the mental health issues. And so, what happened when you tried to, I'm sure before you started your own organization, this is what we always do as advocates, you probably tried to go to the NRA, or you tried to go to some of these trade organizations and say, what are we doing to address this? Can we form a committee? Did you try that route first before you started your organization?
Well, okay, so I'm going to share a personal story. The president of my company, my firearms company, and dear friend of mine, took his own life with one of our firearms. This is one of the people that
Wow.
used to notice, right? He used to notice. He used to talk about suicide by firearm and how prevalent it was within our community, the Second Amendment community,
Sure.
and I. I never would have expected it from him. So, there's a part of you that starts to think about like, yeah, we sell firearms, and sometimes they can be used in a negative way. And what I wasn't seeing was so think about the alcohol industry, right? The alcohol industry got ahead of DUIs by leaning into it and coming up with solutions. I wasn't seeing solutions for any of these problems. I just kept hearing it's a mental health issue. You got to fix it, right? And the origin story of Walk the Talk America in 2018 came from a random dinner with a stranger where she was actually asking questions. Like, she had two firearm guys at the table, so she's asking questions saying like, hey, I have no skin in the game, but what happens during a mass shooting? I was like, everybody blames us, we blame mental health, and nothing ever happens.
Right.
And then she asked one question, changed my life. She's like, well, since you can't work with the mental health community on restriction, because, we had gone down that conversation path, she's like, how do you work with them on the things you can agree upon? And that was
Mm,
that, that
yeah.
was like, had such an impact on me because I was like, wait a second, there has to be mental health organizations that have answers to these problems. And I just got to find it. So I would say I almost went outside of the firearms industry first to see if there was firearm industry friendly mental health organizations.
Sure. Sure.
you
Right.
know, um, when you think of the NRA at that time, the NRA was going through a lot of problems. It wasn't a good look to be affiliated with the NRA, so it was better for
Mhm.
me to kind of go outside of it. And I think that's worked to my advantage, is that I'm from the firearms industry, but in the mental health community and behavioral health community, they don't see me as the NRA, if
Right.
that makes sense.
It does. It
Um,
does.
Yeah, so I would say I went outside of the industry first to see if there was anybody, but I also didn't understand mental health. For me to assume that they have the answers to the problems, they just needed funding. In the beginning, I thought I could just big pharma my way out of it. I was just like, hey, if I, at that dinner, my national sales manager turned to me and he was like, you should donate $1 a gun to mental health, right? And what does that mean? Like,
Mhm.
okay, anyone can give money to mental health. Really, what made Walk the Talk America take off and go to the next level is I was forced, when I found out that they did not have the answers for me that I was looking for, to come up with our own creative programs inside the gun industry. So it's like anyone can add money to mental health. We're from the gun industry. How are we going to be different? And that's really what jumped it off. Like, that was the jump off point.
How was the gun industry responsive to founding this organization? Did they see it as a threat or did they see it as, "Oh shoot, this is something we've needed for a while?"
Oh, it was a lot tougher in 2018. You know what I mean? Because guns and mental health were mutually exclusive back then.
Right.
They did not go together. So, kind of to tell you a quick story, the very first program that I came up with were the free and anonymous mental health screenings. Right? I found an organization that had free and anonymous mental health screenings that went on paper to say that they are not going to be involved in the Second Amendment fight. It was Mental Health America. It was the only organization that I found that would take that stance to stay neutral. So when I started working with them and I found out they had the free and anonymous mental health screenings that I could have access to, um, I thought, okay, like, what if I were to put it in the box of all of my guns, all the
Mhm.
gun companies that I represented? And I represented four major gun companies outside of the United States. I imported them to the U.S., so I had, uh, you know, rights to those names. I could do
Okay.
whatever I wanted in those boxes. And thank God I had foreign manufacturers in the beginning, because I feel like as Americans, our freedom is so important to us. I feel like in other countries, they kind of like let freedom go.
They have a
So
more
to that,
collective mindset, yes.
right.
We have a more
And
individual mindset.
yeah, and for them, like I knew it was easier just to be like, I want to put these in the boxes of your guns. And they're like, what is it? They already trust me. You know what I mean? I'm
Mhm.
handling their sales, their marketing, all their stuff. And
Sure,
it's like
sure.
free and anonymous mental health screenings for our customers because we want our customers to be healthy, right? And every
And
one of them is like,
what
yeah,
was this screening? Like, just so that I can picture it in my head. So this was, let's say you get this, you're suffering, and you have some mental health issues, and you open this gun box, and there's this thing here, this card. Was it something that you could just go online and you could fill that out, and then if you
yep.
scored in some, like if you took 10, I know this from my own mental health questionnaires that I've done. So you would just click these boxes, and if you scored a certain score that was in a crisis, let's say, what would happen? Would it just give you access to resources and like free, like a 1-800 crisis line, or how did that work?
Yeah. It tells you basically where you fall. And it's
Okay.
so funny because the very first time that I took one, because I, here's the thing I am from a community where if you screw up once, it's over. Right? If you get
Sure.
one person's gun rights taken away or you feel like you violated them, it's a wrap. There's no walk the talk America. So when I first got the screening, I filled it out as if I were normal. I filled it out the way I was
Sure.
feeling that day. I filled it out again with the worst possible answers. And if you go on there, they have one for depression, anxiety, substance abuse, schizophrenia, right? Like they have bipolar
Sure.
disorder. They have all these different screenings. But I had to go through it first to make sure that I didn't get a phone call or an email or
Right,
something.
right. Someone's gonna come after me, or someone's gonna
Right.
like look at my VPN or or my what
Yeah,
IP address, and then come
exactly.
and take my gun because of the fact that I filled out this screening. Sure.
Right. So as I'm doing that, I understand that they don't even ask about your firearms. I thought
Mhm.
that was really unique. Like there's no question of like, do you have firearms in the house? Right. Like that's the
Right.
biggest fear that
Well,
people have. Like they don't understand it.
like I will tell you, so not, this is sort of a side thing, but you said the whole thing about, do you have firearms? That is one of the things that really made me upset about the way the military approached suicide prevention. They did this whole thing about maybe 1 or 2 years ago about screening sailors for firearms, and it just upset me so much because it doesn't get to the root cause analysis. The root cause analysis is what is going on with that sailor's family, what is going on in that sailor's workforce, or what has happened in that sailor's childhood. And none of that it was being addressed. It was, oh well, let's just take away the firearms and then we'll solve the problem. And I just, oh, but anyway, yeah. So you go through this questionnaire and you fill it out like you're having your worst day, and then what does it do?
It
Or
just
worst time?
basically says, look, you're in critical stage. You have
Hmm.
high levels of this. We suggest you get help. And that's it. And now it's on you to kind of navigate that pathway. They'll give you some resources, right?
Hmm.
Um, so I thought, okay, this is good.
It is.
If I can just get gun owners to understand that guns and mental health can go together, and there is a way, because there's a fear. Like most people don't know where to start, especially in 2018 in the gun community. We didn't know where to start. So when I came up with the idea of putting it in the gun boxes, that was really another test. I was testing to see where this was going to go. I didn't know at the time. I had to have a meeting with my team to say we're going to do this. We're going to be the first gun companies to ever do this. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if the NRA is going to come after us. I don't know if
Right.
NSSF, which is National Shooting Sports Foundation, is going to come after us. I don't know if our customers are going to get angry. Like I didn't know, you know what I mean? Like
I
because the
do.
way
I
that
do. They could have seen this as very offensive, and
right,
they
why are
could.
you blaming the gun,
Right.
right? Like
Right.
why are you blaming
Hmm.
um, what was awesome was in the first 6 months, we were getting people from our community. Hey, I just bought a Bursa. Bursa was one of our lines from Argentina. I just bought a Bursa. It has this card in here. I just want to thank you guys for doing that. And they would
Wow.
literally start telling stories to we were not prepared for that because we're not mental health clinicians.
Oh
We're just a gun
wow.
company. So we're getting
Right.
people calling the office sharing whatever story they went through, but also being appreciative that somebody was finally addressing it. Um, and that, that warmed my heart. But then I knew I was ready to take it to the next step, which was start approaching other gun companies and seeing if I can get them to do it.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Right,
Like,
right, and now you've tested it, and you were probably able to check with that mental health organization too to see how many people filled this out, how many. I mean, you were probably hopefully tracking and seeing some sort of stats of go ahead.
we had on that note, because you probably have some listeners that are like tracking. That's not good, right?
Right, right, I guess not the word tracking, but more just
Yeah,
just how many people who responded,
right. Landed on the page. We got
right,
to see that,
click-through
right?
rate, I guess is the
Yeah,
word,
click
yeah.
through rate. Absolutely. Because that's really the only thing that is tracked on our end. And people, that's come actually, and it's funny you bring that up. It's come to kind of hurt us when it comes to grant funding and things like that, because everybody wants metrics, they want data. And we pride ourselves and have earned the trust of the gun community by kind of ignoring that and not tracking those
Right.
data points. People ask me all the time, how many lives do you think you've saved? And I'm like, I could tell you a million anecdotal stories of people that told me, hey, you really helped me. I don't want to share this, but thank you. But it's hard to track how many lives you saved. It's easier to track the other outcome,
Well, and
you
I
know?
I agree, and I think that you have to look at every statistic with a skeptical eye because of academia. And you also covered that in your podcast you were on 3 weeks ago. Academia is largely progressive. And I believe that who's ever funding a study and giving you a number, there is usually a ulterior motive to how they are collecting that data. And we have to be skeptical of that at the same time. But to your point, numbers are what drives grants, and so I can see where that can be difficult. So you are back to the story. You're getting these cards in. You're starting to branch off into some of your U.S. suppliers, and at this point, are you an organization or have you started it as an organization?
Yeah, I started it as an organization. So
Okay.
I was up and running. And the most unique thing is they told me it was going to take months. And actually everything fell into place. Like the stars aligned perfectly. I remember getting the letter that said you're official 501c3 the same day that Mental Health America had reached out to me, because I had written them, I call it like the Jerry Maguire memo. Talk about changing the world. And no, it was it
That's
was funny
great.
because I had a board member who was actually like, I wrote this long email about how we got to come together and change things and we could work together on stuff. And I remember showing it to one of my board members, and the board member was like, that's great. Why don't you wait till we have a website and we actually have the 501c3 letter? And I hung up and I was like, hit send, ignored it, sent it off. And that's really what kind of kicked the organization off, because they came back to me, Mental Health America, and we're like, we're interested in meeting you. Can you fly to LA? And I was like, sure. I flew to LA. And when I got there, it was really interesting because I got there so early. I was nervous. And there was the vice president, Debbie Plotnick of Mental Health America, was out front randomly. She's like, who are you? And I was like, I'm the gun guy, the guy who wrote the email. And she's like, oh, we didn't think you'd show up. We're happy you're here. And just her saying that, I knew like, all right, we got a lot of work to do, because if you didn't think I was going to show up, um, you already have a perception of people from the gun community. I'm sure other people have tried this before and it failed. You know what I mean?
Right.
But
Sure.
that's kind of how I jumped off. But all of it was luck. Even the name, like coming up with the name Walk the Talk America, when I thought of that, because I wanted to do something that was apolitical. Like I didn't want
Sure.
to be, I just wanted to work with people that want to help people. Like I do
Right.
not care. You can even hate guns, but love what I do, and you're all right with me. You know what I mean? As long as you
Sure.
support what I do.
Exactly.
So I thought, walk the talk America. Like if you're really about saving lives, you're going to walk the talk. Like you're not going to get in the way or do something nonsensical,
Mhm.
right? You're going to try to save lives. And I remember thinking that can't be available. And it was available. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
No, no. I mean, it's the perfect name. And it says exactly what it is you're trying to do for America. You're trying to actually do action to keep people safe while preserving their ability to protect themselves. And there's a lot to be said for that. And I think that you could have just stopped with the placards. You could have just that could have been the whole organization was just doing screenings and but then you grew and you started doing other things, correct?
Yeah. Let me tell you something about growing. Like, the worst part is when you start doing things and they really resonate with people, and then like every year someone's like, "What's new?" And you're like, I'm not a rock band. I am not a hip
Right.
hop group. Like, I'm not supposed to put out an album every year. Like, there's so much work to be done. And you're right. Like, the cards alone in the boxes of gun companies, and keep in mind,
That
I've
could have
got
just been the
companies,
whole thing. Yeah.
the whole thing. Absolutely. I could have a full-time person going around and getting this. We get it on ammo boxes. We've gotten it in numerous thousands of gun shops, trainers, Ruger, uh, Bursa, High Point, Arms Corps.
Mhm.
Like, I can just start rattling Canic. I can just
Right.
start North American Arms, right?
This could be the entire nonprofit organization with
Right.
just the screening. Mhm.
Just the screenings. But
Mhm.
um, what was cool is being accepted, and then kind of coming up with this idea, working with the mental health community, and then starting to see holes, and then figuring out like what you can fix. So um, in the beginning, when I first started, I could get on every gun podcast or gun show. Like, the gun community welcomed me. They were
Sure.
curious, you know.
Right.
I couldn't get on a mental health podcast or a mental health show to save my life. And the very first person who actually brought me on their show, who is he had a show called Noggin Notes. His name's Jake Wiskerson. He's one of the biggest board members I have, most actively involved board members I have. I remember I went on the show and he's like, "I got to tell you something. I'm a clinician and I'm a concealed carry holder, but we can't bring that up on air." Because he's like, "My people, they will ostracize me." Like, that's what he said. I remember thinking like, "Oh wow, that sucks," but okay, like, I'm just happy to be on the show.
Sure.
Well, after I did the show and he started to hear like the mindset and what I was doing, he reached out after and he was like, "I want to I want to help." And I think the best way to help is joining forces with you. And he'll even joke around and said, like, I had to come out of the gun owning closet. And that really took the organization to a completely different level, because we had the first Pro 2A, openly Pro 2A person with a platform who's a therapist,
Yeah.
right?
I mean,
Like,
that's
who's
powerful.
calling out his own people, right? Saying you have blind spots when it comes to guns. You might be judgmental. Don't let your bias scare people away from getting help. So when he joined, it became this organization that had every component to it, because we had the gun manufacturers, we had the distributors, we had the dealers, we had the support of the instructors, and then we had the community. What we didn't have is somebody on that other side that would represent us and say, "Listen to these guys." So he joined, and then we created the first in the United States uh, cultural competence course for mental health clinicians and people that worked in behavioral health and healthcare in general, where we would give them CEU credits for attending. And it took off. And it was like,
Oh, I
boom,
bet.
program number two. Like, there was such a curiosity about it. There's a lot of clinicians that wanted to learn, which was encouraging, right?
Well,
It was fun.
people who own firearms or people that are advocates for owning firearms, or I think people who want to know, and you said it in that show that I was listening to earlier today, there are people that want to know that they don't have to rely on someone else to take care of them and to keep their family safe, to keep to protect their property. And I think that there is something to be said for that. There's a protection mindset that happens within that community. And that community needs support. It needs community. It needs people around to support. And that's where mental health comes in, because you do need those clinicians. You do need those experts to who understand how to identify particular mental health diagnostics. They understand the difference between somebody who's anxious or somebody who is has schizophrenia or bipolar or something more extreme. And so I think that it's so important for them to be a part of the conversation around gun ownership, because it's ultimately just going to make gun owners safer because they have access to those resources, and it's destigmatized to seek help for issues. I mean, I was just talking to a guy the other day, retired Navy SEAL. He's part of the organization that I'm volunteering with for this race coming up. And he was just casually talking about a conversation with his therapist. And I thought, wow, that is so refreshing to hear someone just say it in a I mean, I see a therapist myself who I've formed a wonderful rapport with here in Ocean Springs. And I saw her as I was retiring, and now I'm still seeing her every few weeks. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. And let's even go beyond that. I think there's something that should be normalized about that. And I think that that's what it sounds like what your organization is helping to facilitate.
Yeah, it's really demystifying for the gun side. I think the best part about it is a couple things. Demystifying the counseling process for gun owners, and also helping guiding them through the process. Who can do what in what state, right?
Mhm.
Also having a directory of pro 2A mental health clinicians. And if your listeners are like, well, what does that mean to you? Like, what does that mean? So, for example, if I feel like I'm suffering from anxiety and I'm like, I'm going to go out to the range and pop off 1,000 rounds because it calms me down. Like there
Right.
are a lot of people don't understand like lead therapy is a real thing, right? Like this person suffering from anxiety or this person might be depressed, but taking away their firearm might make it worse, right? Like you have to feel out the situation and understand the gun owner mindset. But the second thing that I'm proud of is that I feel like for the gun side, for the 2A side, for that community, we finally gave gun owners an opportunity to feel good about promoting mental health without compromising on their philosophy about firearm ownership, right? So historically, if you think about, hey, I want to support suicide prevention or mental health, you had to support somebody who didn't necessarily align with your belief system when it came to the Second Amendment. They might believe in things like red flag laws or ERPOs or believe in transfer laws where you don't, but you also don't want to see people die and you don't want to see people suffer. But historically, you kind of had to kind of just donate your money or your energy into organizations that don't feel the same way you do. And we finally gave people that to where you could walk up to a crowd of people that may be in pain because there was some sort of school shooting and have discussions with them about what the firearms industry is doing to combat these negative outcomes of firearms. Um,
Yeah.
you know, it's something unique. Whereas before, the industry always had to say it's a mental health problem, right? Like
Right.
you guys got to fix it. Now it's like, look what the gun industry is doing to get ahead of this, and they're doing it better than you.
Right. And
Like,
and I mean, we want to be part of the solution. I think that's the ultimate outcome that everybody wants, is that we want everyone at the table to work together, and it doesn't have to be an either or issue. As I was saying earlier, it doesn't have to be take the guns away or give everybody who wants one a firearm. So tell me a little bit about the trends in the industry. I'm just curious, since like if you go back 10, 15 years, has gun ownership become more generally speaking, more restrictive, less restrictive? How has been the legislative fight over the years? I mean, it seems like every, couple years we're going to have a school shooting, and after the school shooting, everybody's going to talk about taking all the guns away. And then what happens? I mean, you've probably seen this cycle over and over and over again. So I'm just curious from your perspective. Is it one of those things where there's just this knee jerk reaction and then things just sort of go back to a certain homeostasis, or has gun restriction gun ownership become more restrictive, more restrictive, more restrictive? So I'm just curious your thoughts.
I think it varies by state, right? So
Okay.
you look at states like Washington State and Colorado, and you've seen some massive restriction happen there. And then you look at states like Arizona, where it's become less restrictive, but you've also seen suicide come down, right? Like and the reason why I mentioned suicide is that's our gun issue in the United
Hmm.
States. Um, I know a lot of people are concerned about their children, as you should be, right? But mass shootings are we have a Venn diagram that I use when I speak in public
Hmm.
places, and you have to be careful, right? Because you don't want to downplay mass shootings of any kind. You don't want to
Sure.
downplay inner city violence. You don't want to
Yeah.
downplay any of that, and I never will. But just to put it into perspective, and I'll swing back to the legislation thing in a second.
Okay.
Um, Down the street is Mandalay Bay, right? Everybody knows what happened there, October 1, right? Mandalay Bay. Uh, we lost
I, d-
59 people.
I don't say what happened.
So October 1, the Route 1 concert in Mandalay Bay, a shooter got up and shot into
Oh, that's right.
a
Yes.
music festival.
I
It's
remember
one of the
this.
worst mass shooting that we've ever had, which accounted for 59 people that day, died.
Wow.
59 is a lot, right? We lose 73 to 76 people a day, suicide by firearm. So
Hmm.
suicide, think about that. We have over a Mandalay Bay shooting every day that the media doesn't publicize. It doesn't sell ad space.
No,
You
in
know,
fact, suicides don't even get media coverage. I know this because even in the military, when someone kills themselves, it's intentionally not put in the news. Yeah.
yeah. So kind of like going back to the legislation thing, I'm not into feel good legislation that won't move the needle on what the main problem is with
Sure.
firearms, right? Um, I feel like politicians come up with wacky legislation like ERPO laws or the red flag laws,
And the red
and
flag laws for my audience, those are laws that say, in your words.
it basically they're laws that say this person is a threat to themselves or others, and we
Hmm.
need to take their guns from them. We need to
Okay.
take away their guns, not their knives, not their medication, not their car. We
Right.
just want to take the guns.
And it
And
does
you
not
can,
provide any mental health resources or any treatment. It's just, let's just take away
nope,
the guns. Okay.
it does not. There's not a red flag law right now that provides help for you. It just basically says we need to take that firearm from your house, and then you're going to have a hearing in a couple weeks. Most of them. I don't want to talk about red flag laws like they're all the same. They
Sure.
can be different from state to state. There are some red flag laws that I think are better. If you're going to have a bad law, I want it to be as best as it can be. Um, but generally speaking, it's you'll have a hearing, and if the court decides that you shouldn't have your guns, you lose them for a year. You can go back there and spend a bunch of money and hire a bunch of lawyers and try to fight those things.
Wow.
But for the listening audience, I don't want you to think what I'm saying is everybody should have their guns at all times, right? But when it comes to red flag laws, I want people to understand the other side of the red flag law. We don't want to make laws that scare people out of getting help. And red flag laws can do that. They can literally make they can make it a barrier to entry where
Hmm.
someone says, I'm not feeling so good. I'm not feeling so hot, but I don't want to go talk to somebody. If you live in states like New York or Colorado, where clinicians can enact those things, um, people aren't going to get the help they want. And I think about all the people that contact Walk Talk America and say, like, I want to get help, but I need to navigate through this because we do have a red flag law here. What about all the people that don't call Walk Talk America that just say, all right, I'm at stage 2, but I'm going to white knuckle it. And then they go to
Right.
stage 3. Then they go to
Right.
stage 4.
Because they're too afraid that
Then,
someone's going to take away their gun so they don't get help.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So we have to understand that sometimes these laws, they're meant for that worst case scenario, but they can scare or prevent people from getting help. All the researchers, all they do is talk about all the lives these laws have saved. I've talked to 3 people in the past that have been red flagged. all three of them said they shouldn't have been red flagged.
Right.
Like they're like, no, that was somebody who said that about me, you know. So you think about people who have bias against gun owners,
Sure.
and
And if somebody
that'll
has an
scare
axe to
them.
grind or they want to weaponize something, that those
Yeah,
things can happen.
absolutely.
So,
Yeah, so it's so feel good legislation is not what I'm after. I'm actually like what I support is legislation that would promote um, responsible gun ownership. So for like one example of that is what if we were to give gun shops a break on their business insurance, right? Like the insurance for their shop if they promote suicide prevention material and
sure.
resources and like it's like getting a break on your insurance when you put a fence around a pool. Like, why
Right.
not incentivize people in the gun community to actually start addressing these things and talking about these things? I would love legislation that would support that, you
Right.
know?
Or have a partnership with a community organization for gun owners that's support group focused or peer to peer support group. I mean that we have that in at the VA. There's PTSD support groups. Why can't there be support groups for gun owners? I mean, everybody, in my view, needs people, especially in this social media driven world. We need more in person and more community organizations at the grassroots level. And what if gun shops were part of the solution to bring together people for camaraderie or for cookouts, for, some sort of a weekly lecture, a talk, a series, where you brought in a good lecture, someone to come in and do a guest speaking. I mean, maybe some gun shops do something like that, but those kinds of programs, if there were a way to incentivize those programs, I do think that there would be interest in that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, even funding gun shops to be able to store people's gun in a time of crisis without
Sure.
fear of consequence, right? Like safe storage, we're starting to see that, right? Like, so for example, there's an organization that Walk the Talk America works closely with called the Armory Project out of Louisiana,
Hmm.
and they have an amazing program, a network of gun shops that will hold your guns in a time of crisis, no questions asked. When Gala True, the person who started the organization, when she was going around in the beginning a few years ago trying to get gun shops to participate, a lot of gun
Hmm.
shops were saying no, and their biggest issue for saying no is they didn't want to
Hmm.
take on the liability of taking someone's guns in and then possibly giving them back too soon. Well, Gallo was so forward thinking that she went out and got legislation passed in the state of Louisiana that said gun shops cannot be held liable for helping you.
Hmm.
And like
Sure.
that's the type of forward thinking and legislation that the gun community needs. We don't need you can lose your gun rights, or we need to ban ARs because they're dangerous, which is the equivalent of saying like I can solve drunk driving by banning red sports cars. You know what I mean? Like it's nonsensical legislation that won't save one more life. And I understand that people don't want to think about these things. They don't want to really research them. They don't want to dive too deep. So they look for talking points. And a lot of time they get their talking points from people that are anti-gun. So they're going to just tell you something to get you to believe a certain way. And you're going to think, oh, I solve gun violence because I voted for this
Sure.
law, or
Right.
banning this firearm, which doesn't, I mean, hands, for the audience members that know guns, hands and feet kill more people than ARs, which is
Hmm.
wild to me. Like literally, hands and feet. If you look at the FBI statistics on death, they kill more than rifles,
You
right?
mean that people kill each other more with their fist and more with just fighting than they do with guns, is what you're saying, right?
Not guns,
Okay.
handguns, completely
Handguns
different,
different.
but
Okay.
AR-15s. But when you look
Oh.
at the media, what do they
Mhm.
want to ban? They want to ban
AR.
the AR-15. That's why I said
Mhm.
earlier, if I told you I could solve drunk driving and you were like, oh, I got to listen to Mike. He seems like he knows what he's talking about. This is going to be amazing what he says. And I say, by banning red
Mm.
sports cars, you're going to be
Yeah,
like,
you just
Mike's a
go
little off.
right,
Right.
right, because you say there aren't that many people who are driving, not all the people who are drunk are driving obviously red sports cars. And I do have to give it to there is one organization, I think it's called Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and full disclosure, in 2014, I myself got a DUI. And I remember one of my required courses that I had to go through for my DUI, get your, you have a suspended license, but if you go through all these classes, courses, is I had to go through a Mothers Against Drunk Driving course. Now I got that waived because I had a class within the military that I went through. But I thought to myself at the time, I'm like, wow, Mad must have gotten some kind of a agreement with the Department of Motor Vehicles to have their course be the course. So that just shows you, like, there are the, and I mean, I don't know what kind of controversy Matt has one way or the other. I think I've heard a little bit about that, but my overall point by just sharing that story is to say there are ways for organizations to partner and to be part of the solution when these things happen. And I'm curious, um, how has been the reception on the mental health side been since you've been doing this? So 2018 to 2025, have you had more mental health organizations come to the table?
Oh my God. Yes. Like I almost, it was easier in the beginning to actually speak to behavioral health and mental health over, I would say, my people. My people in the beginning were very tough. Like once I said guns and mental health, they were like, stop blaming the gun, right? They just
Right.
jump to that conclusion, not realizing, no, I'm one of you, trust me. When it came to the behavioral health side, even the anti-gun side, like I have lots of stories of the anti-gun side, like coming up to me after they see me at a speaking event, and they're just like, "Yeah, we hate guns, but like I love what you guys are doing because it's
Isn't that
something so
great? Yeah.
different." Yeah, it is. It's not. It's nice to be respected and loved. Like I will say that. Like we get caught up in a lot of fighting, all this, and a lot of people think like, "Oh, Mike's out there and he's really giving it to these groups," and I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm showing what we can do. And you talked about solutions earlier. When I used to run my gun company, what drove me nuts was when people would come and point out a problem without giving a solution. It could be a
Sure.
stupid solution, but I needed something, like say something. Like, what is your solution? And I feel like kind of the rest of the world was looking at the gun industry saying, okay, if we can't restrict your rights, then what's your solution to this? And I felt like as gun people, we were always kind of like, it's a mental health issue, right? Like now it's like, okay, the expectation level of me from behavioral health and healthcare and research is going to be so low. They're
Hmm.
going to expect that I'm going to go up there and say it's a mental health issue and then say Second Amendment, pride from a cold dead hands, right? Like
Hmm.
I guarantee you that's what all of them think I'm going to do. But when I go up there and I start talking about all of our different programs, I start talking about our inner city uh, youth shooting sports program, like Kids of Kings, our
Yeah, that
instructor
was a really
course.
interesting program to learn about at your booth. Can you just very briefly explain that program?
Yeah. So historically, when you look at inner city youth, the gun industry, and I would say all of behavioral health has always, we've kind of ignored it. And behavioral health has always said, no, don't, you can't, guns are bad, stay away from them. Right. We all know that inner cities get plagued with violence, but most of the time, the violence is also from these kids not having any direction or understanding firearms. So we lean into it. We use the firearm like a martial art. So we have a pilot program in Atlanta where, these kids get mentorship from people in the firearms community. And what's great about that is a lot of these kids have never been introduced to firearms in a healthy manner. It's always been through a video game, could be a video, could be a movie, could be a cousin who needs his
Or
firearm because he's on the block, like
I was
whatever
gonna
the
say it
reason
could be
be.
somebody on the streets. Yep.
Just kind of the streets, right? Like we don't care. What we want you to have is knowledge. We want to make it so that you can identify a firearm and you know if it's loaded, if there's one in the chamber, you know how to responsibly use one. You could teach your friends how to responsibly use one because all these kids have access to it, even though they shouldn't. And we don't just hand them guns. Like I don't want the
Sure.
listeners to think like, no, there's a financial literacy component that we add to it. There's life skills that we add to it. We tie the ability to shoot to their grades and their behavior. So if you're not, you're not acting right, or you're not performing well, you're not shooting, you're cleaning up. Right. And we have not had one issue with a kid that's come through our program. And it's a little counterintuitive for people. It's really interesting. There are many people that work, especially in behavioral health, that they show their racist colors. Like, they don't realize they have a racist blind spot. So I've literally seen this happen when I'm speaking at an event and I show them a video about Kids to Kings, and they'll raise their hand. There's always one that says, "Is this a good idea to be putting guns in these kids' hands?" And I'm like, "What do you mean, these
Whoa.
kids?"
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, it happens all the time. And then I'm like, "Wait a minute. You don't have a problem with the little white hunter in an orange vest. Why do you have a problem with these kids on the screen?" And I see them. They're like, "Oh my God, I just swam to the racist part of the pool. I have to get out of this." Like, these kids deserve knowledge about responsible gun ownership.
They do. They
And
deserve to know what their rights are about
yeah,
firearms in a responsible and lawful way, as we
yeah. And
all
think of
do.
it. I took my kids, because the NRA show was in Atlanta last year, and I took my kids to the show. I had all my kids there. I was walking them around to booths. I mean, we're talking walking them around to the Glock booth, the Ruger booth. I was introducing them to engineers. I was introducing to owners of these companies, presidents of these major gun companies, competition shooters, right? Everybody that works in the fire station, looking at these kids in the face saying, "Are you into guns? If you really like this, you could be the next competition shooter. You could be the next firearms engineer at Ruger. You could be
Right.
the next gun shop owner in your community. You could be the next instructor in your community. Guns aren't bad." And
No, and they're also an investment. That's something too people don't
yes.
really talk about. I can tell you this because we have a lot of firearms, and they tend to go up in value during certain times of the year and down in value at other times of or other years. And so they are useful for a lot of reasons. And
Mhm.
I believe that we were given a constitution for a reason. We were founded upon certain principles. Those principles have stayed the course from 1776 to today. And we ought to understand those rights under the Constitution. It's not about taking away those rights, just like the First Amendment. It's not about taking away the freedom of speech. It's about people having proper and respectful conversations with their speech. And I feel the same way about the Second Amendment as I do the first when it comes to this issue. It is about using these laws in a way that they were intended by our founding fathers. And I think that what you're doing is outstanding, Michael. And I wish that every single person who is listening is taking a look at this issue and really seriously considering what the outcomes could be if we all work together on a solution to this problem. Because I do believe that mental health is a community issue too. It is an issue from a sense of when someone feels hopeless. Because I always say I was never suicidal, but I also can say there were moments where I didn't want to wake up the next day. So I suppose that made me suicidal, but or actually not moments, but weeks on end, sometimes months. And it's a horrible feeling to feel alone and to think that you have nobody and to think that you have no community. And so for you to establish an organization that helps in that's truly remarkable. What are some of the other initiatives or some of the other hopes that you have for the program?
Well, so one of the initiatives that we have is a firearms instructor curriculum that you can basically plug and play into your own curriculum for CCW classes. That's very popular. There are states that are starting to make mental health and suicide prevention a requirement, in training. And
Mhm.
instead of like seeing that as a bad thing because you're forcing us to do it, like we understand, we're just going to make our own curriculum, right? So a lot of instructors were going to states and saying, "Hey, I'm a firearms instructor. What do you want me to talk about?" And the states were like birds who want to fly south, but don't know why. They're just like, "We don't know. Just incorporate suicide prevention, better mental health." So we decided to make that program I think it's really cool. We have another program called Roots, which stands for Responsible Ownership, Outreach, Technology, and Safety, where we shine a light on safety products from the firearms industry into the academic world, because a lot of people don't know that there's more than just safes and uh, trigger guard locks, right? Cable locks. Um, there's a lot of great technology out there that allows you to have access to your firearm, but speed and efficiency come together with these products. So we're shining lights on those companies. There's a lot of people out there that have grants, researchers that have grants that want to study these things. They don't know they exist, right? Because they're not in gun world. So we like to say that we have something for every negative outcome of a firearm when we do.
That's
But
wonderful.
I think one of the biggest things that I can honestly tell you is our consulting work. Like, I didn't realize that I was going to be called upon by suicide prevention organizations or mental health organizations that just want to understand this better and learn. And, that's what it was really about, is bridging the gap. And we built those bridges.
I love it, Michael. And your work is a model for so many things. Like when I think about, I'm working a lot of issues now with as an advocate for military justice, and it's frustrating. And in terms of sex crimes, we have the people who are on the military sexual trauma side, and then we have the men who say they've been falsely accused. And I believe that those two groups are both victims. And there has to be a way to, but it's very similar to this situation that you're talking about, but just in another context where both people are feeling like there needs to be reform or there needs to be something, but the two groups can't come together. And I believe that one day, just like in your situation, how you're having the mental health groups coming together with the gun rights advocates, one day we're going to be able to bridge the gap between the men who have been falsely accused with the people who are legitimate victims of a sexual crime, because they are both victims. And I think that in this case, there needs to be that same kind of collaboration, and you're absolutely doing that. And I think that's wonderful. You found a gap within your industry and you filled it. And that's something that we all should be trying to do in our own respective areas. So as we close out this call, tell us a little bit about more where people can find you, and if they have if they want more information.
Sure. You can find us on most all social media platforms at Walk the Talk US. I would say LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram, Twitter are our strongest. You could also go to WTTA.org. That's our website, or walkthetalkamerica.org, and check out all the resources that we have. I just want to tell everyone, everything we do is free. Okay? There's no services, there's no subscriptions, there's nothing like that. How we are funded is by the firearms industry. So if
Mhm.
it wasn't for companies like Ruger and distributors like Lipsy's and things like that, we wouldn't exist. So I don't want people thinking that we take money from people that might have agendas. We have total
Sure.
support from the firearms industry. And why that's important is that people think the firearms industry doesn't care. Well, if they didn't care, they wouldn't be funding me. Trust me.
Right.
It's hard to ask for money and get no return on investment, except,
Is this your full-time, like, are you able to do this now full time?
yeah,
Wow.
it's actually, yeah, I went first 2 years was self-funded. I got to a
Sure.
point where I burned through all my life savings. I had a discussion with my
Wow.
wife. I was like, do I want to continue? I was driving Uber, like
Oh my
driving
god,
Uber to
Michael.
make this work. Yeah, like
That's
it's a
that's mad
the
passion.
yeah, the hardest part, like, I know we're up against it, but 2019, I made it to the White House. I'm running out of money. I'm actually helping prevent the prevention program for the military. I'm working with the VA. At the time, the head of suicide prevention is this guy, Matt Miller. I go home to Vegas and I'm working Uber. Every person that I drive around would ask, "Hey, man, do you enjoy driving Uber?" And I always wanted to answer, "No, I'm actually going to drop you off and kill my high school guidance counselor when we're done." Like that's how I wanted to answer. But
Yeah.
the crazy part is, I would tell them about this organization and what I was trying to do, and everybody loved it. Everybody loved it, and I couldn't tell them that I was just at the White House, because they would be like, I had an Uber driver who was batshit crazy.
Right.
Like,
Although I have had Uber drivers tell me, like I had a guy who told me he was like a bodyguard for Michael Jackson. So that was in Vegas actually. And yeah, he told me he used to be one of Michael Jackson's bodyguards and he's
and it
been
might be true,
and
but
he's
you
right.
probably
I
were
thought he
like,
was
well, now
I
you're
don't
driving
know.
Uber.
But no, he was awesome though, and he gave me a bunch of great food suggestions, and we had a wonderful conversation. But you meet some of the most interesting people who drive for Uber, and
100%. And you meet
so
interesting passengers. And it's not a knock on Uber. I'm just telling you,
sure,
like, if you want to make something work, you better be ready to sacrifice a minimum
everything.
of 3 years if you truly believe in what you're doing. If not, go get a paper route. Like, seriously, you know what I mean? Like, I mean that with
Yeah.
love. Like, people ask me all the time. I'm like, there are times when I'm like, what am I doing?
I
And
know. I feel the same way about
yeah.
podcasting. Believe me. There are times I'm
Um,
like, oh my God, I've done this for 5 years and I'm still this tiny little podcaster, but that's okay. I love
yeah.
doing it and I get to tell stories like yours and it's so rewarding. I keep telling my husband I'm going to stop and I'm going to slow down. And then those are always on the days that I get a call like I did today and I get this amazing story that pops in my lap and I'm like, oh, I have to tell that story. I have to. So I know
Oh,
exactly how you feel. I think it's wonderful that you were able to get that opportunity to do this full time. You're obviously the man for the job, and you are living your passion. Even though I know it can be probably sometimes just you're pushing up against a system that has never had something. So when you're the first of something, it can be very difficult. So I really admire what you're doing.
thank you. And thank you for having me. I appreciate it. This has been great.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll meet you backstage to say goodbye as I go full screen. All right, guys, that's a wrap. 2 shows this week. Got 2 more shows next week. Next week is going to be an amazing, amazing lineup. I've got Assad Khan. He is the author of Betrayal of Command. So he was one of the first on the ground Marine infantry in Afghanistan. His book was incredible, blew me away, learned a lot about what really went on during those early months when we were on the ground in Afghanistan. And then on Thursday, I'm having Jennifer Barnhill, and she has a book that I'm reading through right now about the stories you are never told about military service from the perspective of the families and the spouses. Very, very eye opening. She is a journalist. So I can't wait to share some of her research with you. So, as I always do to end these calls, please take care of yourselves, please take care of each other, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye bye now.